space inside to talk, to have your moments of like, having crappy feelings and crying and feeling awful, but being able to, be proud of yourself and sort of be your own cheerleader. And then she talked a lot about, because we're at the Women's Fund, like female to female alliances, but she was very vulnerable and open and courageous about like the rehab that she went to deal with trauma from her childhood. And
Well,
but there was so much stuff that I was
she
like,
an
oh,
actress?
this is so much of the
Yeah,
stuff.
she's an actress.
She's an actress, and now she's doing a lot of humanitarian work with women and girls in other countries. And so she's kind of said, I think, like the direction of acting in my life was kind of meant to be to help me do the work that I'm doing now, that I feel is like my purpose here. So it was really
Cool.
good.
Cynthia, what are those flowers?
Ranunculus.
She grew them herself.
I did not.
I would have believed that because she has quite the green thumb.
Sure.
And they're really fun.
Yeah, those are really
Innocuous,
pretty.
never.
Ranunculus.
Like rhino.
Oh, ranunculus. Okay. Okay.
I want to grow some. The ranunculus I know are more like a, what are those squishy, the spongy little plants that they like dry, they'll grow on rocks and
I
stuff.
think I know what you mean. They're
Sedum kind of. There's a version of this that's really short, and it has all these colorful rose-shaped flowers, but it's
really
a
bright.
spreading, yeah. It's like a spreading, low-growing, like desertish thing. But these are also annuals, but they look like roses to me.
Ooh.
Oh my goodness!
Oh.
More flowers.
Wow.
Well, these are much better than what I have
The
here
scent on
because
this
these
is gonna
came
be
from the garden.
Wow,
What
those
are
are
those?
huge.
Believe it or not, that is a newly hybridized tulip.
A tulip.
It's new.
Goodness.
Or it was new last year. They just hybridized it. It's beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
I thought maybe it was a peony.
Yeah,
I've
oh,
never
it's
seen a
like a
yellow
peony.
peony.
Yeah.
Is it a
Oh
perennial?
my goodness.
It's a bulb. It's a tulip.
So you'll get it again next year.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Maybe.
Wow.
The only problem with it is when it rains, they collect so much water they snap off.
Oh.
Oh, they
because
get
they're
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah, the stems aren't big enough to support it. I hope this year they'll hybridize it a little better.
It's like the peonies. The peonies also full. So it's so
Mhm.
Yeah.
pretty.
And
Right.
they are so short. I have two of those in my yard.
Thank
and
you,
They're
Judy.
beautiful for like a few days, and
That's
then
it, right?
that's it.
That color is so cheerful.
Yes, it is.
Beautiful.
And what's the incense
It's a
scent?
happy place.
Jack, do you remember?
Patchouli.
Okay.
That's what it says.
It says patchouli on the package. So, I guess we'll get started. It's about 20 after. I had a grounding, kind of get present sort of exercise plan for just starting out, and it involves standing up just for a couple minutes. Okay, so you're always free to not participate if you don't want to. And any kind of exercise where we increase our awareness of what's happening in the present moment can help us get grounded. Because it's easy to get lost in the activity of the day, and then even after we finally arrive, we're not actually there yet in the room. So this is to help us get in the room. And it's going to tie into our discussion today, but I just want you to notice as you stand the feeling of your legs supporting you, and just allow the awareness in of the fact that your legs are supporting you all day long when you're standing or walking or running, and you're not really aware of it. And notice the solidness of the ground beneath your feet. And notice how you can adjust. You can loosen your stance with your knees, bend your knees a tiny bit, and feel a little bit more relaxed rather than having your knees hyperextended, you can play around with the position and notice that your bones can support you if you put a little bend in there and you're not extended too far back or too far forward where you have to strain, that your body kind of supports you naturally. If you allow it to, if you allow your bones to hold you up, you don't have to work that hard. And as you notice the solidness of the ground pushing up against your feet, just start to notice or become aware of this thing that you learned, maybe in grade school sometime, that the reason you feel that pressure against your feet right now is because there's this thing called gravity. And we can't see it, but we know it's there, keeping us from falling off the earth as it flies around at a great speed. And finally, just allow yourself to fully slip in, to drop into your body from wherever you may have been, wherever your mind has been, wherever you were before you got here, whether it's traffic or somewhere else. And just allow all of you to drop into your body right now so that all of you is fully feeling the earth pressing up against your feet, noticing the energy in your legs and your muscles as you hold yourself up right now. Notice your breathing. Notice what your shoulders feel like. And then just relax and slowly sit back down in your chair. So I really appreciate everyone's participation in these little exercises that we do at the start, because I think that we often don't realize the effect of the rushing around that we do. And time is this thing that is always in very short supply, and we're always trying to squeeze more into a day than is actually possible. Or we might have ideas about what's possible and try to squeeze it all in regardless of reality, or what reality keeps telling us. And this is just one of the ways that we impose a sort of violence on ourselves. Rushing around is one of those ways that we do violence to ourselves. And other people can be on the receiving end of that violence as we're rushing from thing to thing through our day. And I'm sure if you think about it, you notice, you can think in retrospect about who got trampled today or this week or last week when you were in a hurry and it felt very important to get to where you needed to go. And it's important for us to notice violence, self-violence and violence to others, because there's a very predictable and documented response to violence. So we know that how humans respond to a threat to violence, which is essentially just rejection of self, rejection of others. Our response is very predictable, and I'm sure that you've all heard of it. It's called the stress response: fight or flight. Or the most extreme response is freeze. So that's where we shut down entirely. Okay? So if someone approaches us in a violent way, either an invalidating response like, you're wrong, or you don't feel that, that's not right, or picking on us or criticizing us in some way, we usually have one of three responses. So we're either going to fight, whether that's physically or verbally. Hopefully it's only verbally, because hitting each other is not good. Or we run away, right? We hide. We have all different kinds of ways of hiding. Or we freeze, we shut down. No idea what to say, and we just totally freeze up. The most extreme form of freezing is probably depression. Sometimes panic. We can go into full-blown panic where we can't act. Our body is freaking out and we can't even respond at all. So this is a good reason for us to recognize violence. We might not recognize the things that we do to ourselves and others as violence until we really look. And so I thought today we'd kind of take a look at and get some ideas of what violence looks like, so that if we want to practice being less violent, that we'd have an opportunity to do that. Okay? So we talked about rushing around. And obviously, there are going to be some situations where it is absolutely necessary that we act with speed. But if we're doing that all the time, if we're always rushing to work, right, or always out of time for, unable to feed ourselves at normal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner intervals when our body needs to eat, preventing ourselves from responding to the call that our body makes for rest, or to use the bathroom even. All of those things are non-acceptance. We're fighting reality. And if we could keep in mind that our body's response to that is going to be something extreme, we're either going to be at war with ourselves, or we're going to be running away somehow. We hide in all kinds of things. Hide in bed, hide in drugs or alcohol or food or TV. We've got all kinds of nice ways to hide. Or shut down entirely. I can't tell you how many people come to me and say, my problem is procrastination. I can't make myself do this thing that I really need to do. And then when we explore a little bit further, it's usually something that someone else wants them to do, or it's something they're trying to pound themselves into, some mold they're trying to pound themselves into in order to be perceived a certain way by others, or to get something else. The goal is not really to do the thing that they're procrastinating about. So how about this one? How hard do you brush your teeth? Right? Something to think about. How hard do you really have to press to make the brush work? Right? How nice are you to yourself when you make a mistake? So, are you impatient, or do you get angry, or do you try to forget it ever happened, or do you get really like crack the whip? You get no break now. You have to work extra hard. Everybody's got their own way of responding to making a mistake, our own interpretation of how bad it is. How bad is making a mistake? how terrible is that, actually? And we might have a pretty violent interpretation of making a mistake. How quickly do we eat our meals? There's another form of rushing. Do we even sit down at the table? Are you a fridge eater? Standing up, standing at the sink, right? We all do this. Not allow ourselves the time to sit down and just eat. The tone of voice that we use when we talk to ourselves in our head. So is it gentle? Is it mostly positive? Like, it'll all be okay. That's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it. It's okay. Right? When we're hurt, when we feel like we're suffering, so our feelings are hurt, our body gets hurt somehow, do we say, oh, that was so stupid of me to cut myself or to bang my thumb? Or do we go, oh, poor thumb, bandage or ice or whatever it is we need to do? Or maybe we do a little bit of both. But is the beating up on ourselves necessary? I would argue that it's not helpful at all. Really not helpful at all. The tone of voice is something that I think is really important to notice and look at, because we in here are practicing all the time being non-judgmental and friendly with our experience. And that's not really easy to do with an unfriendly voice. You know? We all can smell bullshit a mile away, and that includes when we try to give it to ourselves. So if we're talking to ourselves in a voice that's not so nice, but trying to be self-compassionate, that's not going to work. That's not very helpful. We have to be genuine. So virtually any aspect of our experience that we want to examine, there's the possibility of finding some sort of non-acceptance there. Sometimes teachers like Tara Brach will use this term, radical acceptance. And the only thing that's really radical about the acceptance that she's talking about is that it's an acceptance of whatever is. So whatever reality is in this moment, we just say, okay. So if that means it feels difficult, okay, this is hard. Without trying to change it or sugarcoat it or manipulate it so it might not feel so bad or we can escape some of it. The first step is always to just say yes. That's radical acceptance. Yes, this is hard. Yes, I hurt my thumb. Yes, I have this really awful project that I have to work on right now. You know? Yes, I don't like whatever it is, you know, my weight, my, you know, something about my appearance or something I did yesterday or said to somebody or the way I do this or the way I do that. And we just say yes to it. We don't BS ourselves and say, oh yeah, you know, everything's great and I'm fine and I love everything about myself. We can offer compassion to ourselves and try to be more loving. And I think starting with the reality is that's the only place that change can come from, is this radical acceptance. So radical acceptance means I'm not Rejecting reality. I'm not pushing back against reality. I'm saying, yes, this is actually happening.
And that goes the same for stuff like outside of you, outside of your control. That's not like, I'm going to accept that this person's abusing you, or whatever, but accept that that is
That person
happening.
is,
And
right.
then from that place, I can make the decision of,
that person was abusive.
yeah.
Yes. Right. So that's the fact.
Rather than
That person was abusive.
trying to fix it or deal with it, or
Right. So one of the unseen forces, like gravity, that's going on all the time is this conversation, this thing that ego's doing all the time. Because the fact is, the person we're dealing with might be abusive. But ego comes in and says this little thing, and we never really question it. You know, are you going to take that? Right? Or what's wrong with that person? Or trying to get in their head and figure out what they're doing, or why they did it, or where they're coming from, or how to make them stop. Right? All about rejecting reality, trying to change the other person. But the only thing that really matters is identification of reality. There's what that person did. And by whatever value we have, understanding, oh, that's not good for me. And then, given reality, what shall I do next? Right? But we get caught up in, I mean, it doesn't matter what's really happening. Ego, or our conditioned self, is not content. It's not happy with reality as it is. It's always trying to figure out how to change it, how to fix it, how to make it more comfortable. And that's its job. We could call it our survival response. That's what it has evolved to do. But we are sentient beings. We're very intelligent beings, and so our existence is about way more than mere survival, right? We want to be happy. We don't want to just survive. We want to be happy. And so being happy is about starting to see the ways in which we automatically, without questioning it, make ourselves unhappy. We're already happy, and we just don't know it. We already have no argument with life. Who we really are has no argument with life. Life just is whatever it is. It's ego that's brushing really hard and fighting the bedtime and doesn't want to eat the meals when it's supposed to, and take care of the body and floss and do all those things that we know make us healthy and happy and balanced and keep our energy sustainable, right? Doesn't want to do the fun thing or the non-fun things. Just wants to do the fun parts. And we're letting it boss us around, and we're letting it boss other people around. But just like we don't even question that there's this thing called gravity, we don't even question that. It's so easy. You let your guard down for a moment, and you fall back into conditioned ways of being. It's just those patterns, those ways that we've learned how to respond without even questioning. And we can do so much damage if we're not looking, if we're not paying attention. We might even think that inflicting violence on ourselves and others is normal or good or even healthy. If we see some kind of benefit in it, there is, of course, there's some kind of benefit, perceived benefit. Otherwise, we wouldn't keep doing it. There's a little bit, ego's getting a little bit of what it wants at the at the expense of the whole picture, right? At the expense of the whole organism.
Can you say that line again? You said about like the authentic part of you is already in agreement.
With life.
Yeah.
It has no argument. It's not pushing back against life. It's not pushing back against anything. It's already there. You experience it at the end of meditation, at the 18th or 19th minute in our meditation. Right? No thoughts, no stress, nowhere to go, nothing to do. Right? That part of you doesn't have any goals. It's just present. It's pure awareness. It's just there. It's not in a hurry to get anywhere.
What do you mean by ego?
Ego is the word used. I'm not using Freud's definition of ego. I'm using the non-dual spiritual definition of ego, which is just the conditioned self. So it's that part of us that over time, as soon as we started to notice or were taught that we were separate from other people, that we had to get and protect and we had to get and protect what we want, which is love, basically, and reject or push away or defend ourselves against what we didn't want. So anything that caused us to feel unhappy or not loved. And we've got everybody's conditioning is a little bit different, but ego is essentially defined as an energetic movement. You can feel it inside when things happen. When life starts to happen around you, the movement is either I want, and a feeling of I want to hang on to that, or I don't want. And it's like a pushing away or pushing against or turning away from that part of life. And it can be boiled down to those two primary movements. I want or I don't want. And you can discover that ego is really separate from your authentic self, because there are some things that your authentic self will choose to do that you can simultaneously feel ego, that I want, I don't want response. You can feel it's kind of like a I don't want. Right? And yet everything in you knows this is good for me, I like it, I want to do it. It's so, for instance, maybe you don't feel like eating all the time. You know that a life impulse means we have to eat. We have to sustain life. But ego might say, I don't feel like it right now. I don't feel like cooking, or I don't want to eat, or I don't like what's in the house, right? But we know our basic underneath impulse, it's mealtime, I'm supposed to eat, my stomach is growling, I know that I need to eat right now. We know that's a good and healthy impulse toward life. Does that make sense?
In part, yeah.
Okay. I think one of the classic examples would be like studying, work or studying versus playing. So ego just wants to play and blow off the work. But deep down, there's a part of you that wants to work to be involved in something bigger than yourself that you care about, to earn a living, lots of different reasons to be involved in work or in school, right? But there's a part of us that wants to turn away from that when it's not fun. Because sometimes it gets difficult. We might not know the answers, or we might have to study for a test or have a difficult coworker. But overall, we know we want to. We know that our impulse is toward dealing with that thing or taking care of that thing. It's like your own internal 4-year-old. That part of you that doesn't really care about, what's going to hurt others. It's mostly me, me, me. It's 4 years old.
Is your ego usually childish?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That just made me think of like the one thing, and I say it often, but now I can see like, oh, okay, that's like the part of me that knows what's good for me, and that's the ego part. Is I've always been kind of a night owl, and I never liked taking naps when I was little, and still now, my body could be tired. I know I need to get enough sleep because I always feel tired in the morning if I don't. But there's part of me that's like that little kid. It's like I don't want to go to bed yet.
Yeah.
So can your ego be kind of in agreement? Like if it's something that your true self wants to do and knows it's good for you, can that also sometimes align with your ego also being like, I
Sure.
want that?
You can get ego to go along with stuff. Yeah. You can get it to go along with meditation if it likes the feeling, right? The trick is if you have an off day during your meditation, then ego might not think that's very much fun. And it might say, I don't really want to do that the next time you try to get it to go along.
So when it's in disagreement, is that kind of like it's shining a spotlight on something you need to investigate a little bit more? If it's something like, okay, I know this is good for me, but ego is wanting to like put it off or not do it or want to go play outside.
Yeah. Or radical acceptance, right? You just notice it. You notice there's this movement. You can feel the energetic movement. It has that feeling of turning away or I can't get enough of it. I want to make this stay. I want to hang on to it, right? Whereas the part of us that has no argument with life allows everything to just flow through. We can have a good time, party ends, we just go home, or the guests go home, and we do the cleaning up, and, right? Everything is a flow, it just keeps moving. But ego's that part that will pick a point and say, I want to stay here, right? I don't want to go to bed, right? I don't want to pick up my toys.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to tell the difference is called discernment. It's something that is a sort of reward for practice. So the more you practice, the more discernment you gain, in essence. Your ability to notice what's moving through and not jump on the roller coaster and go for the ride. It grows. Your ability to just be present, to stay, and to notice. Because that's the goal. That's nonviolence. Being able to notice what's occurring, and our first automatic response is not to just go with whatever thoughts we have about it. Right? Somebody did something to me, I'm not going to talk to them anymore. Or some little, inside that's like, okay, not friends like that anymore. It's changed forever. Right? There's something in us that responds in a pretty extreme way to life not going our way. And as we sit, I think we can notice the 4-year-oldness of those responses. And notice that that's not the only available option. There are other, more adult, less violent responses as choices. but because we are conditioned, and we mostly go with what we're conditioned, our go-to, our automatic response, until we've got enough practice, is just fly off the handle, right? Just to do the very first thing that we always do. And we don't get any change when we do the thing that we've always done. We only get change when somebody does something different. And we can wait 100 million years for the other person to change. Or we can do something different. But I want to return to the concept before we break to meditate, of nonviolence and radical acceptance. We talk about this in here in lots of different ways because I think it's a difficult concept. As soon as we start to talk about acceptance, the mind or ego comes in and says things like, how's that going to work? I'm supposed to like everything, and I'm not supposed to be able to act or respond to everything or anything. It thinks that means you're totally unable to take any action, completely passive. Everybody can just dump on you. You have to just keep doing whatever you're doing and let life do whatever it's doing and like it. And that's not what I'm talking about at all. That's not what radical acceptance means at all. It does not mean we have to like it. But it does mean that we will stop causing additional suffering on top of what's already happening that might not be very nice. So pain is something that we're all guaranteed to experience in life. But suffering is what we do with the pain. It's everything that we put on top of the pain. Everything we say to ourselves about the pain. This is so terrible, and it's never going to stop, and who did it to me, and how terrible they are, and on and on and on. So we make ourselves feel worse about an already bad situation, and most of the time we don't question who or what's doing that to us, or why we're doing that to ourselves. Why are we allowing that to happen? There was this really cool line in the Walter Mitty movie. I can't remember the whole title of that movie. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Yeah. I think they took some liberties with the book, but there's a line in there about somebody's mother saying, no, I'm sorry, I have it confused with a different movie. There's a line in something that I just watched, and I can't remember what it is right now. About when storms come, leaving the front and the back door both open so it can blow through and not make a home. And so suffering is kind of like when we let the storm in and it stays and we give it a home so that it can keep causing all kinds of ruckus and racket and keeping us miserable. The Secret Life of Walter Mitty is a really good movie, though. I highly recommend it. But the point I wanted to make was about what we do with pain. So it's one thing to acknowledge it. Pain wants our attention. We acknowledge it and we let it move through. But it's quite another to hang on to it and to get all wrapped up in it and make it our best friend, and then it becomes, oh, this is part of my identity, and then we want peace, but we can't really have peace unless we let go of some pain that has become part of our identity. And we will often choose to hang on to this thing that makes us feel like a solid person, right? A story we can tell, a memory that we can point to of something bad that happened to us, rather than letting it sweep on through, move on through.
I understand the pleasure of violence, the adrenaline rush, the pheromones, your hormones go wild. But other people, I don't know why, enjoy suffering.
We all do.
Oh,
We all do it to some degree.
where does the enjoyment come from? The suffering.
There's this way that we are built as human beings that we have this need to predict what's going to happen. That's survival, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to predict what's going to happen, we need to label everything. So we have to know who and how everybody else is and who and how we are. And then we make predictions about how they're going to respond and what they think of us, right? We're constantly trying to predict and control and plan for our safety. Right? So in the past, like in the olden days, you can see how that was really important, right? Trying to get a sense of, you meet a stranger from a different tribe, right? You have to try to get a sense of who that person is and what am I supposed to do, because your life might well depend on it. But now that function is, I mean, we've got fairly well ensured safety right now in comparable terms, right? In our country, compared to other places, compared to, just having to survive in the wild. Right? So that trying to plan and control and predict is kind of an overdrive, right? We're doing that because somebody might say something mean to us, rather than they're going to throw a spear and kill us, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're treating situations in modern day as though it's life and death. And so there's that instinctual part of us that wants to predict everything is very strong. And to some degree, as a human being, to function as spirit in a human form, we kind of got to remember our names, because somebody says something to us, we got to know who they're talking to, so we use a name to refer to each other. I recognize the consciousness that shows up here in your form as Jack, right? I don't think, when you guys all come here, I don't think that you're Jack or you're Jack. I know that you're Jack because I expect you to show up in this body, right? So it's useful. In some ways, it's really useful. But we get attached to this idea that we can know. We want to know. We want to be reassured. We want some certainty. We want some solid ground beneath our feet. And until we notice and recognize that what we are is spirit, it's consciousness, it's limitless space, the thing that we are, we can't define. We can't actually define. Until we acknowledge that, the futility of trying to define ourselves, we continue to go about our daily business doing just that, defining ourselves. And it can be very, very important to some people, right? Make a comment about some innocent, comment about somebody or something about their hair, or don't notice their hair, or, it can be so innocent. The things that we get attached to, we don't even know that we're doing it. We're identified with our job, with our age, with our race, with our cultural, endless amounts of cultural stuff, the ways of being that we associate who we are with, right? Our upbringing. And then there's the way that my family thinks about things. And we get attached to all that stuff. We collect all that stuff and say, that's me. That's how I know I'm me. But the scientists have said that there's no actual seat of identity in the brain or anywhere in here. All that stuff that I just talked about, including your memories, your hopes, your dreams, your values, your plans, your goals, all that stuff, each one of them is like a transparent overlay. Have you ever seen like a transparency, like in school they used to draw on these pieces of plastic and project them onto the blackboard or the screen, and then you could layer them, and then you get, if you're doing math, then you can have different colors and you can lay them on top of each other. Or like people used to make these little slides, go on vacations and have these little tons and tons of pictures made into these little, you could look through them. You can hold them up to the light and look through, and there's a teeny little picture there, right? And in our minds, the way it feels to us is all that stuff is stacked up. So hopes, dreams, memories, ideas about ourselves, everything I've ever done, been, want to be, all stacked up. And when I look down through all those transparent images, it's the illusion of solidity, that there's something there, right? But there isn't actually anything there. Can you show me your hopes? Can you show me your memories? You can talk about your memories. You can't show me the past. We can talk about the past, make movies about the past, but you cannot actually access it and show it to me. And you can't show me the future either. All of that stuff that we take ourselves to be is, in fact, imaginary. But the feeling is that if we collect enough of it, that's me. And we get very attached to all that stuff. I'll give you a good example. So I've been whittling down, I've got these boxes of school stuff. All the notes I ever took in my college courses, right? And all the stuff I read. Not all the books, but like all the research articles and all that stuff, and every paper I ever wrote. And I was thinking about what would happen if I let go of that stuff. At some point in time I thought, well, I don't really have any proof that I did anything. I've got a little piece of paper with all the grades and another little piece of paper that says I graduated. But like all that stuff that I wrote and thought and contemplated and papers I labored over, what happens if I just chuck it in the trash? Sorry?
You kept all the papers that you're describing?
Yes.
Why?
Well, that's the question that I'm asking. So it's the illusion of, if I have this stuff, then that was more real. the past is more real. That actually happened. Right? I was there. I have proof. But what's the actual impact if I take all of that stuff and I put it in the dumpster? What changes? Right? What actually changes?
Your link to the past shrinks.
Does it? Paper links me to the past? And do I want to be linked to the past? I'm not that person anymore. Who cares what I used to think? So what if we're, instead of all my boxes of school paper, we're talking about boxes full of all the stuff that you think about yourself? Okay. And what happens if you chuck all that in the dumpster? I'm not saying we're changing anything about you. I'm saying you're just considering what happens if you dump all the ideas you have about who you are, who you were, who you want to be. You're still you. What changes? What actually changes?
At least in myself, the links to the past, which for me are mostly Kodachrome slides.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'll project them and look at them, and it's aha. So that's why I'm doing some of the things I did. I can see my father doing certain things, and realize that.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so you have a thought when you look at the images, but does that really change fundamentally anything about who you are?
It may give me a little more understanding.
Possibly.
Possibly, right.
So, does looking at a picture or something and seeing how you might be like your father change the way that you behave now?
It may not change the way I behave, but it may give me a little more understanding of why I behave certain ways.
Mm-hmm. And I would argue that it doesn't matter unless something is altered by that information. So,
And I would argue that
okay,
you're not old enough to make that statement.
I'm not old enough to make which statement?
The statement that it doesn't matter.
Well, I'm asking you to all for yourselves investigate the truth of what I'm saying. You decide for yourself. I just want to ask the question in a way, and I really appreciate the talking back that allows the opportunity to really look, to really ask that question, the only question that I think matters, and that is it true? Whatever we assume, whatever we think we know, if we can always ask, is it true? Then we're never lost for very long. That question saves us. So thank you so much for considering. I know that this is a little bit heavier than I didn't know we were going to go to this place, but thank you, Jack. I really do think it is worth questioning, and there are never-ending levels of being able to look at this question and contemplate, what changes if I let go of my ideas about myself, and what is real is how I used to look, and pictures about myself and thoughts about the past and how things used to be really real. It doesn't mean that it didn't affect us. It doesn't mean it didn't shape us or mold us. But the question is about how hanging on to what we used to think, what we used to take ourselves to be, all that stuff that we think built us or made us what we are today, do we still need to hang on to all of that? Is that who we are? If we take ourselves to be this whole collection of everything that's ever run through our heads, and arguably memories they live here, right? They are not us. They are something that we access and review. And I think that's important to remember. It's a really big question. Who we are is constantly unfolding. It is undefinable. It's changing every moment. I forget how many 7 days or something, we've basically changed over every single cell in our body. We're not the same person that we were a week ago.
Ever that.
Yeah. Anybody else want to ask anything or make a comment?
I'm desperate to know what you did with your books and your papers.
They are sitting there awaiting my decision whether I need to go through and look one last time. But they're
On their way
headed out the door. Yeah.
We accumulate all those things, and sometimes we never look at them.
I
have
know.
boxes in my attic, boxes and boxes and boxes of my kids.
Yeah.
Everything that they drew or wrote,
Right.
anything I have, and what I'm gonna do with them. Just,
Right.
Okay, it's wonderful they're there, and sometimes I go and take a look at them, but
Yeah.
I don't know why still
Mhm.
keeping them there.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
was just having the conversation yesterday about books and like the book collection that you have, and it wasn't so much like that you should just get rid of all your possessions and stuff, but
Right.
like the wanting to keep some of these was like it's kind of like a trophy case. I'm like, look at all of the stuff that I've read, that people can see that I must be smart if I read these books. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
really, there's some books I do want to keep because I like to refer them or
Mhm.
lend somebody them. I'm like, okay, I really don't need to keep my what was attaching. Like, okay, outside of myself, these books prove and validate that I'm smart and worthy, and that's why I'm wanting to hang on to them. So, okay, that's silly. I can let those go.
And I'm not saying to get rid of every single possession that you own. That also would be, so that's at the other extreme, right? I'm not going to be attached to anything at all. We're humans, so we have attachments, we have emotions, we treasure moments from the past. But like you were saying, or like you're saying, if there's so much stuff and I've never even looked at it, then
Sometimes I just took pictures of and threw away. So I don't have to have so many boxes.
Yeah.
But still, some things they just kept there. And
Yeah.
Yeah. And once I realized the only reason that I was keeping this stuff was because it was sort of like my connection to the value that this book gave me, that if somebody sees that I read all these great nonfiction books, then I'm smart and I'm worthy.
I think books
But they're
are
just
still-
taking up lots of space. And some of these I don't need anymore.
Yeah.
Are you in an apartment or house?
From the apartment. So when I moved, that's when I realized how many books I have. Because it's so heavy, and I have all these heavy boxes that, okay, purge some of this stuff now.
Twice a year, Columbus has a shredding service. We just had finished one over at the Expo Center, and people bring in boxes. You're allowed a maximum of 5 boxes, and you give it to them, and you watch it being shredded.
But books, I will cry to see
Yeah.
them shredded.
My books I take to Half Price Books, or I actually sold some on Amazon. And
Yeah, those, yeah, you can sell them or lend them to people, take them to the
Yes.
library, donate
Yeah.
them to the library. But to see them shredded, I don't think I can go through that process. It's sad.
So I think that's really wonderful that you're able to question like that. You know, is it true? If I have all these books, then
Yeah.
it means that, or I will feel that, or people will think that.
yeah.
Right?
I mean, coming here and doing this is helping me question a lot more
Uh-huh.
of those things. Like, why did that bother me so much that I didn't get recognized for that thing, or
Mm.
the book thing, or whatever it was, that
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been asking myself the same questions before.
So let's take a little break and come back and have some silence practice.
No problem.
I don't exactly know what's going on, but
I feel the same way whenever it happens.
Suggestion,
I had like
suggestion, scan them, put them on flash drive,
Yeah,
stick them in your TV,
Ex-
and you have a
girlfriend
continuously
sleeping.
changing picture.
She just
Very
scared like
nice,
at
thank
night.
you.
How's your blood pressure?
I'm sorry.
How's your blood pressure? This past
That's a good
night.
idea.
No, sorry.
I'm just going to.
No problem.
Thank you, appreciate it.
You know, there is a limit to how much revisiting the past we can do before it interferes with the present, the stuff that's actually happening right now. You know, we can spend so much time reminiscing or looking at old pictures or being in the past that we're not, right? There's so much going on right now, people to spend time with and things to do and see and think about that are right now.
She's kind of a foodie. She went to the Hills Market and she was for checking.
Yeah, it sounds like someone I'd like to hang out with.
Yeah,
Yeah, very cool.
but I want to get her book now.
Great.
One of the things,
She
there's
knows lots
a
of
couple
people.
things
There's
that
always
she said that I was
have we
like,
seen you
it
once?
reminds me of stuff we talked about.
What's
And,
your book?
It's called like
I knew Jenny.
something with like the bitter and sweet
On the board of
something.
local matters.
Forget, I'll find it.
Okay.
But she talked about, having those moments of like
Yeah, she was
recognizing
doing like
when you
a lot of marketing for her.
when you're telling yourself, I should do this and I should have done that. And she's like, you start shitting on yourself. Like, things do that, you shit all over yourself.
She had a lot of those
I
kinds
was like,
of people.
oh, I love that. It's
More
so-
violence. Yeah,
Yeah.
the should is more violence.
Yeah.
Just thought maybe that was perhaps work well.
Yeah.
She was at Friday, Saturday? Or
It
Blonde,
was
curly
just a
hair,
one night
glasses.
thing. It was
Oh,
just
okay. I was
Thursday
asking if
night.
there's any chance you had a name change, but,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
somebody, there's another Jill who knows Jenny.
And and then I saw Elizabeth Lester's full episode on Oprah before they took it off that I got to watch this weekend.
Didn't
I
have
haven't
a
watched
story.
that yet. DVR.
Yeah.
Oh, it was good.
So she showed up.
And then I was just before I came here, I was seeing, oh, this other full episode. She live streamed a lot of stuff, and I caught just the tail end of, I think it was Super Soul Sunday on Sunday with
But,
Tracy
yeah,
McMillan. It was sort of like a relationship
She's doing
expert, sort of, but she's really more about like she's more of a spiritual teacher, but kind of relationships is sort of like her playground that she sort of talks about that stuff through.
More than one.
And so that full episode is on Oprah's website right now. That
I think there was something that at least
I have a million
looks like
Oprah
thinking
things
of that,
DVR'd
so.
right now that I haven't watched.
It's happened because
you know, she has so many great speakers. There was somebody that I wasn't aware of, but my coworker said her sister was going to see him speak, and she lives out in California. Gary Zukav, I think.
Yeah.
right.
He has
Oh,
a lot of good stuff on her
I know.
website.
It wasn't me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, just
I always
articles and stuff
Seeing
like that.
similarities
Yeah,
in
I had.
people.
Do you know who
and
Gary
I've
Zukav
never
is?
Yeah,
seen anybody that
Seed of the
looked like
Soul
me,
was
and
the
once I
first
found it,
thing
was
that
like,
I
oh, that's
ever
weird.
read by him,
there's
and I think
some
Oprah
guys
is
that
where I
you're
first saw him. That was a
representing
long
Yeah.
time
to
ago.
extend the- someone
I
said
wasn't
that
familiar
you
with
look
him
at
yet,
and
but
I
my
saw it.
coworker said
He
her
looks
sister was
almost
going to see him.
identically
She lives out in
made.
California. She's like, this looks like somebody that you'd be interested in.
You would, like,
Oh.
I think you would like
I
him.
hadn't heard of him, so. But then I saw, oh, okay, he was on like Super Soul Sunday, and I think I recognized the name of that book from probably hearing it somewhere, maybe from you. I don't know.
I think he does her, like, part of her help desk thing, if you've ever seen that, where, like, people go in with their problems and get, like, a quick fix from him, or, like, some idea on how to fix their lives or whatever.
Are these your books, Olivia?
Yeah. If anybody, I periodically trot them out. I've got more, but if anybody wants to borrow, just write me a post-it and your name and phone number. So
I
I
still
know
have that
where
one
it
of
is.
yours.
Okay. Come Children is one of my favorites. That,
She's good.
Places That Scare You and Start Where You Are. Those are two really good books by her.
You read Uncomfortable with Uncertainty?
Yes.
That's the first one I read.
Yeah. She speaks very plainly and I think with humor. I feel like when I read her stuff, I can just feel the warmth coming from the page. There's just something about her. You can.
So this is really good too. I read that.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're talking
That Real Happiness book is it's like a 1 month learn how to develop a meditation practice kind of thing. There's a CD in the back of the book and teaches you all the different. There's a meditation on emotions and on the breath and a walking meditation, and there's different sections in there where it's like week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, because it's supposed to take a month to develop a habit.
Right. Yeah, I knew somebody who used to just each month she'd pick something.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try this for a month. Get the habit of it, or try it out for a month and see if she likes it.
Sure. Can you write me a?
Yes.
Is that the Sharon Salzberg?
Actually
have
real. Like,
One
is
of
there
her other books
Huh?
that I
I've
need
heard
to drop off at the
both
library.
things, like, oh, that's
She'll
just an
have
old
this
wives'
at
tale
work.
that it's a month.
It's good. I didn't get
It's
that.
21 days actually.
Is that for real though?
Yeah.
So I need to
Yeah,
take it
there's
back.
research behind
I'll
it.
get it out again.
What's 21
Yeah.
days?
To develop a habit, do something for 21 days in a row, and then it starts to become automatic. You build the neural pathways that make it more automatic. You don't have to put as much energy into it.
Yeah, whenever there's days, you know,
So-
anything.
Is Jerry not coming back? I was waiting because I thought I was waiting a minute. I thought he was coming back. Let me just check.
That was helpful for problems.
Yeah.
Right, so
I would
the
think.
audio part was helpful for me because I'm not ready. It would have been more hard. I smell these flowers.
Yeah.
We
So
should
good, all kinds of ways. They usually make the audiobooks
You want to
like
bring it?
different
Yeah.
because of the
Yeah. I'm glad you did. I like that.
I've never used it before. This is
I
a
love
new
it.
experience for me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You may want me to turn this.
Good. Thank you.
It's up to you.
Doesn't bother me.
If you
Just
want it on, then
it may once out. I'm good.
okay. So, just start to get a sense of your spot on the earth. And just notice how you're feeling after the discussion that we just had. There might have been some things that your mind is still working on or questioning. And you can just notice that that is happening, if that's happening for you right now. And feel your body sitting in the chair with your feet on the ground. And I'll start our timer. And you can allow your attention to drift up to the top of your head and begin to notice. And your job is just to notice whatever sensations, whatever you find, whatever you're noticing is happening at the top of your head right now. Just being with it for a moment. Seeing what the experience of that is like. And then allow your attention to drift down and notice the front of your face. Especially noticing around the eyes and the mouth. Notice whether your jaw is clenched. And check to see where your tongue is, whether it's stuck to the roof of your mouth. Or could you let it just rest comfortably in the bottom of your mouth? Part your teeth slightly. And then let your attention drift around to the sides of your head and notice what you find there. And just imagine for a moment your ears dropping to release any tension that's there on the sides of the head. And let your attention continue around to noticing the back of your head and the back of your neck. Noticing what you find there. Perhaps you find tension or some form of discomfort. And you might ask if it's willing to relax. And open to receive any relaxation that occurs. sensations there in the back of the head or the neck to be there. As your attention moves down to notice your shoulders and your arms, just allowing your attention to scan lightly across your shoulders and down the tops of your arms to your elbows, down your forearms to your hands, all the way to your fingertips. Just noticing what's there in your arms right now, today, this evening. Coolness or warmth, tingling or tightness, tiredness or restlessness. Just noticing. And then allow any sensations that are there in the arms to just be there as you gently shift your attention to begin noticing your throat and scanning down to notice your chest and what that feels like as you continue on down to notice your belly. Taking note of any places where you notice tightness or tension. Allowing yourself to notice that it's safe here, and you can allow the front of your body to relax if it wants to. Just noticing what that's like after you offer your body the suggestion to relax in the throat or in the chest or in the belly. Not forcing, just offering the suggestion. And perhaps you could imagine that your body opens or is more receptive to receiving that suggestion if it wants to. No force required. And then gently allow your attention to drift further down to notice the chair beneath you and your legs all the way to the floor, scanning from your hips down your thighs to your knees, and further down noticing shins and calves, down to your ankles, and noticing your foot from your heel all the way to the tips of your toes. And you're just noticing. Noticing what your legs seem like. What's the experience of your legs this evening? Whether it's restlessness or relaxation, coolness or warmth, tightness or tingling, or nothing at all. Now gently shift your attention from noticing your legs up to noticing your breath. Just noticing the fact that you're breathing in and breathing out. Noticing that no effort is required in order to breathe. It's just occurring without your will, without any effort. Not trying to change the breath in any way. And just take note for a moment of where the breath features most prominently. Where do you notice the sensation the most strongly? Perhaps it's at the nose, where the cool air is coming in, the warm air is coming out. Sensation of the air moving past. Or perhaps you notice the rising and falling of your chest or your belly. All you're doing is noticing. And as you notice your breath, you might allow other things that are happening in the present moment to come into this field of awareness along with your breath. You might notice the sound of the clock, or the feeling of your clothes, or the feeling of the chair beneath you. Or you might notice the sound of traffic, or the temperature in the room. Or the smell of the candle. Or the taste in your mouth. And there's nothing to do except notice. Even if what you notice is restlessness, or tension, or sleepiness, or boredom, or silence. Or relaxation. Whatever's occurring in the present moment for you is fine exactly as it is. And however it is perceived by you in the moment is fine, exactly as it is. All you need to do is notice. And as an aid to noticing, you could introduce this question into your meditation space if you want to. What happens if I allow everything to be as it is? What's the experience of not being in opposition to anything in this moment? What if everything in this moment really is fine, exactly as it is? Thoughts can come and go, as thoughts do. There's no need to get caught up in any one thought. You can just notice there's a thought, or thought is happening, and come back to noticing what happens when you allow everything to be as it is. What happens when you relinquish effort and struggle? What happens when you give up planning, give up control, just for this moment, and allow everything to be exactly as it is, as though it were perfect, already perfect. You can reintroduce the question as needed. If you get lost or drift away, as soon as you remember, you just ask, am I really allowing everything to be as it is? Am I truly and deeply allowing everything to be exactly as it is in this moment? What's the experience of that? What's it like? And the only job is just to notice. Just noticing what that's like. Just take one more minute to really soak that in, to savor the experience of that silence, that spaciousness. Setting an intention to remember that the space is within you always. And as you feel ready, begin to send some energy to your arms and legs, and movement to your fingers and toes, taking as much time as you need. Thank you all so much for coming. Namaste.
George didn't come back.
Yeah.
He made an interesting statement. I said, how's your blood pressure? He said it was good until we got into this subject. Trouble himself.
Ethan, I've got yours in mine.
Thank you.
Change for your big
$1 bill.
Yeah. So I've been having
Thank you for the incense.
Yeah, that was really nice.
That's
Can't
new.
believe
I
how big
I
it
never
is.
got involved in that.
Flowers.
Considering all the hippies I used to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope it helps.
Probably will.
Okay.
See ya.
Good night.
But as I went through years ago,